morning, everyone. It's really nice to see you. Could I ask you to put your hand up if you've had any trouble sleeping over the last week? I'm going to keep my hand up. Wow. All right, so I can't see you guys online, but I can tell you that this room, the whole room, could have done with a bit more sleep. So I'm Emmi Salonen. I run a London-based practice, Studio Emmi. And originally, I come from Finland. So in Finland, the sun doesn't really come up in the wintertime, and in the summer, it doesn't really go down. So to explain this a bit better, I've done an infographic. So winters are really damn dark, and the summertime is pretty nice. And having grown up in a place with such extremities, I often think of life, or sort of think about the dualities in life. I studied graphic design at the University of Brighton in the UK, after which I worked at Fabrica in Italy, Carlson Wilke in New York, Futera in London as the UK creative director, and then in 2005, I set up my solo design practice, Studio Emmi. It will be 20 years old next year, and this is some of the work from those two decades. And I'd say that everything I do, from the process to the final output, is tied together by a simple idea: positive creativity. I really think that design can bring people together, foster well-being, and create sustainable choices. So I recently did a study on creative well-being and how as creatives manage stress and sort of continue to sustain our creative practice. Now, the results were quite interesting. Out of the creative professionals, only 14% said that they are experiencing a happy week. And 67% said they regularly experience a lack of motivation. And this was quite closely followed. 66% said that they regularly experience anxiety. And this is what I really want to be talking about today, our creative well-being. And I think it's really important that we talk about it and that we support one another. Because in comparison to the general population, creative industries are 3 times more likely to suffer from mental ill health and burnout. This is based on a study by Ulster University and wellbeing charity Inspire. Now, a few years ago, I went through burnout myself. And it didn't just happen one day. I used to feel really exhausted and sort of really overwhelmed all the time. And I would come home and I was like, I just don't have the energy to do anything. So I would cancel meeting friends, I would cancel my exercise, but nothing was working. I was just continually more and more tired. And a time came when I actually felt like, I don't think I want to create anymore. Like, I've lost that spark. And that really frightened me, because I felt, well, if I'm not a designer, like, who am I? What is my identity? And that was then followed by kind of physical collapse, more or less. And I just knew I had to pause. I had to take a break. And I took a year off, a full year, and I went on sort of inspiration expedition. And I explored some amazing places from French Polynesia, Ethiopia, the Arctic. And wherever I went, I spoke to other creatives and makers. And I was asking them about their motivation and their well-being and the challenges that they face. And how do they keep going? But most of my sabbatical was spent in Finland, in the Finnish archipelago where I grew up, sort of collecting flora and fauna and playing around with no clear purpose or outcome in mind. And I was just looking at my everyday surroundings and trying to find that sort of unusual in the usual. And I became so incredibly inspired by these ecosystems around me, because ecosystems are all interconnected and interdependent and seamlessly sort of flowing together. And I started to think that creativity doesn't exist in isolation. Like, it doesn't just happen here in a silo somewhere during the work hours. And I realized I have to look at all the areas in my life a bit like an ecosystem in a much more holistic way. And in particular, I wanted to know how to find my purpose and my inspiration, how to strengthen my resilience and my intuition, and how to get more energy. So I created a creative ecosystem model, and I really hope that this will help you as much as it has helped me to sustain my creative work. Because I think we often so focused on the creative output that when we are not as intentional about the nourishing inputs, that's when our well-being sort of falls off balance a bit. And I believe that if we focus on these core 5 input areas, connection, wonder, pause, movement, and joy, we can all have a much more healthier way of being and working. And it really should be more like breathing, sort of in and out, rather than feeling suffocated by work. But fundamentally, at the core of this model, I really need you to know that you are already enough, just as you are. So this model is about bringing attention to the resources that you already have within you and around you in your own creative ecosystem. So going through burnout made me think a lot about happiness and where does my happiness come from? So I did a course with Yale on the science of well-being, and I also became a happiness facilitator. It's an actual title from the Museum of Happiness. And one of the sort of studies that both of those places teach is by Sonia Lyubomirsky on what makes up our happiness. So this study says that 50% is down to our genetics. So just how we are predisposed to be, what our genetic and biological set point is. And a huge 40% is down to our actions, which leaves 10% down to circumstance. So despite us experiencing some real hardships in life, those situations themselves don't define our happiness. But it's how we think, what we do, and how we act that has much larger influence. And this is really great news because it means that we can take much larger sort of control of it. And learning this statistic made me relate it back to design thinking, because design is all about problem solving. And in the same way, we can take charge of all the challenges and sort of difficulties that we face in all areas of life. So when I had my burnout, the pressure to create had become so much. Like the whole idea of the creative process was just too much. It was too overwhelming. But in a matter of fact, it was in the creative process, in the resource that I already had, that I found the tools to all these 5 areas of the creative ecosystem wheel. So in a way, the solution was in the problem. It's kind of like having the antidote in the poison. And it goes back to that duality in life. Our strengths are also our weaknesses. So I now try and approach all the challenges I face in life like I approach design. There's always multiple options, and we should really try and enjoy the journey. So I'd now like to invite you on the journey across the creative ecosystem wheel with me. And we'll start with connection inputs that will help to sustain your output by giving you meaning and purpose. And connection inputs is all about connecting to yourself, like looking back to your foundation. What's your story? Where do you come from? Really connecting to your roots and earthing yourself to now. Evaluating where you are, where you want to go, and really connecting to your values. And really importantly, and we've heard this so many times this week, is connecting to those around you. Because that's really at the core of what is in the sort of center of a balanced creative life. So by connecting who you are with what you do, you nourish your purpose. And when you lack connection, these feelings and thoughts can take many shapes. You might struggle to ask for help and support, or you might have real difficulty seeing your own strengths, and you sort of feel quite unresourceful. And the trick really isn't to know all the answers, but it's just about figuring out different ways to deal with them, or just be with them. Because it's really important to be okay with really challenging thoughts and feelings, and realize that all of us really do go through similar inner battles. So how do you figure out what do you want in life and what brings you meaning? This is where creative process can really help us. So if you think about this in the same way that you think about the briefing at the beginning of a design project, what do? We start by asking a lot of questions, defining the brief. And in the same way, we should look at where we are, where we want to go, and what are the components that are really meaningful for us to make our creative life work for us. It also means that we need to decide what not to include and sort of define who our team is, who can support us and who we can support in return. Have a little think about, what does success mean to you? I think it's really important to focus on values and not passions. Think about what really matters to you. What do you hold as highest value? And how does that relate to where do you see yourself succeeding? Because when you relate things that you do back to your current values, you can then check that you're spending your precious time and your precious energy on people and activities that really matter to you. And I guarantee this really helps to sort of manage your stress levels. In my study, I found 4 key habits for creative growth. Reaching out when experiencing challenges and knowing when to say no. I'll share the other 2 with you a bit later. So ask yourself, what does my ideal life and day look like? So that's the connection input. So if you approach it like the briefing stage of a creative process, it will help you to focus on your values, which will bring you meaning. And now we'll have a look at how wonder as input will help you to sustain your output by giving you inspiration. Now, I really believe that the world is full of wonder. And I think we all know this feeling when we're traveling, when everything is like really new and exciting, and like the most mundane details are like, look at that. For example, look at that. Like, what? I saw it yesterday. I was like, stop the traffic. What is this guy? It's like some prehistoric thing. Like, no one, like, the driver didn't stop talking. Everyone was just going about their business. I'm like, I've never seen anything like it. Like, what? Unbelievable. So, thank you. So what we really need to start doing is look around in our everyday and find that unusual in the usual. And keep a mindset that's like an open air, or sort of like airing your thoughts with others and your discoveries as well. So explore the ordinary with curiosity to nourish your inspiration. And when you lack wonder, it can feel really dull and tedious, like every day just feels the same. And you might be following really like well-established, but actually quite unuseful ways of doing things. Or you might be settling for less out of the fear of failure. So how can you keep being inspired? Now here, the research stage of a creative process can help us to have that curious mindset. Because when we're researching for a new project, we're really open to any direction and any outcome. And we're looking around and we're searching, and that synchronicity and those ideas and inspiration can pop up in most unexpected of places. So really try and keep an open mind and keep learning things and keep asking why. What's flashing behind me is how I do my color research. So when in my everyday, like, colors line up nicely, I just take a picture of it. And I have a folder for my palettes where I go when I'm designing identities that I then refer to. I've added a few colors on this strip. This is my Melbourne color palette. Port Douglas was myself at the cafe, fitting in nicely. This is the first time I met Gemma. She brought some fruit to the hotel. I was like, gosh, look at those colors. And now we're here. So ask yourself, do you let your curiosity play? Ooh, I think I skipped a recap. So wonder input helps you to nourish your inspiration. And if you approach it with a mindset that's like a research stage, it will really help you to keep that open mind and find the unusual in the usual. And now we'll have a look at how pause will help you to sustain your outputs by giving your intuition or strengthening your intuition. And pausing is probably my favorite part of the wheel because of my own personal journey and my experiences. And it really is all about giving time for yourself and allowing yourself to reflect and learn and grow and plan for things to come. And I think it's important to remember that pausing can also be productive. Because if you take a break and then you come back to work and you're re-energized and you can look at things with a refreshed perspective, there's really no point feeling guilty about it. So I encourage you to seek solitude, preferably in nature, but just a moment on your own will do. And it's in that space where we can have the most important conversation of them all with ourselves. And that stillness is actually full of activity. It's where we think, reflect, sustain ourselves and heal, and things will start to make sense. So book in time for solitude and reflection to nourish your intuition. And when we don't take time to pause, it's really easy to miss what our inner self is trying to tell us. And when we don't take time to listen to ourselves, we are less sure of our feelings and our emotions, and our internal and external struggles feel kind of quite uncertain and unresolved. So how can you learn to hear what your intuition is telling you? So here I refer to the ideation stage of a creative process, which can really help you to sort of trust your creative spirit. And for me, this stage is kind of twofold. So we have our eureka moments when we just have that idea, and it can happen really suddenly, like normally we're like going for a walk or having a shower or doing something quite unrelated to sitting at our desk. And the other part of it is when we very intentionally put our work to rest and take a bit of space from it, only to then come back and look at it from a different angle, and like we realize what works and what doesn't. I also think that no matter how much we try and rationalize creativity and getting ideas and all that, there's always an element of mystery in that process. Like, how did they get that idea? Or like, even better, how did I get that idea? So pause for me is about the creative spirit within us all. And these are clips from my Domestica course, Sustainable Visual Identities. Yeah, let's skip that. So have a little think, when do you choose not to have more time, even though you're good? So maybe you choose to worry about something, because we do choose to worry. Maybe we like overthinking work, maybe we're spending a lot of time on social media, I'm so guilty of like the black hole of Netflix. It's terrible. Maybe we think that being busy means we're very successful. And some of us are really actually quite uncomfortable with stillness. I have a sort of rule on myself that I'm not allowed to turn my phone on in the mornings until I've done my routines, like morning stretches, having a breakfast. And this window, this sort of an hour window, gives me the space to check in with myself. Like, how am I feeling? What do I need for that day? What do I need from that day? And then I can let the rest of the world in, and I can let the rest of the world take all my attention away, because that is what happens when I start checking social media and emails and all that. So I really recommend finding or like carving those spaces in your daily routines. And I want to tell you about this idea of time affluence. I don't know if you've ever heard this term being used before. But it's the idea of having enough time to do everything, including doing nothing, without feeling strapped for time. And there's some really interesting studies around time and money. And in one study, they found that people who prioritize time over money are happier than those prioritizing money over time. Fair enough. In another study, people were asked directly, like, what do you value more, money or time? And almost 70% of the people said that they value money more. But even in this study, they found that people who value time more are happier. And I often think about this. I don't think it's really a duality. I mean, it's got two players in it. But I think this is the one of the balances that is really hard to get right. And here are the two remaining habits for the key creative growth for my study: keeping to daily routines and having space for reflection. So ask yourself, how could I be a little kind to myself right now? And just to recap, pause inputs helps you to nourish your intuition. And if you approach it like the ideation stage, it will guide your creative spirit. And now we'll have a look at how movement can sustain your output by strengthening your resilience. And movement is really all about moving your mood as much as it is about moving your body, and sort of really letting go and enjoying the journey rather than like just focusing on the outcome. So try and be open to have conversations with people that could change things and change your sort of perspective and even change your values, and sort of reconsider of the things, like how do you do things and how do you think about things. And I think often it's a lot like comparing ourselves to water. Like water, like it always reforms to its environment as it goes on. But obviously, without losing who you are at your core, of course, like water always remains in its element, regardless of what shape and form it takes. So stay fluid and evolve with the process to nourish your resilience. And when we lack movement, we can get stuck on really negative patterns of thinking and sort of mull things over and over. Maybe we're really overconfident and sort of miss opportunities to learn and grow. So how can you become more resilient? Now here, the development stage of a creative process can really help you. Because once we have the idea, what do? We want to make sure that the idea is resilient. So we poke it, we test it, we make mock-ups and dummies, we ask for feedback, we compare it to other ideas. And maybe the conclusion is like, yeah, the idea doesn't work, so we just leave it aside and move on. And this is completely fine. So I encourage you to try a similar way of thinking in all areas of life. Just be a bit more flexible and fluid with it. Oh, and those were my sort of tests. It's not moving anymore, but it doesn't matter. That was letter H and the sort of logo experiments around it. There it goes. So in my study, a huge 40% of the creatives said that they exercise daily, and they were saying that walking is their sort of best option to beat creative doubt. Now, I can't express how important it is to take time away from our screens and get up and move. Moving your body will really directly affect on your thoughts and your emotions. And after my burnout, I started dancing. I went to dance classes like 6, 8 times a week. And it was so transformative. I'm not sharing any dance videos with you. That is not going to happen. But this is me practicing skiing so that I could independently ski to school. So movement really helps us in the current moment with our focus and our mood. And if we keep moving, if we do it regularly, it will really help our future selves. And it protects us from stress, from depression, from dementia, amongst other things. And there really isn't anything else with such immediate and long-term positive benefit for your brain, for your creativity, and for a happier life. So I really encourage you to find your thing, whatever it is. Maybe it's skiing, maybe it's dancing, it doesn't matter, maybe it's just walking, but find it and keep at it. And ask yourself, do you let your pleasant and painful thoughts and feelings to flow freely? And have you given your body time to move? So movement really helps you to sort of strengthen your resilience. And if you think about it like the development stage, it will help your body and mood flow. And now we're on to the last input area, joy, that will help you to re-energize yourself. And joy is really about finding those moments where to lose yourself, and when you're really carefree and entirely present. So pay attention to those moments that give you that energized focus, that feeling of like, yeah, I know what I'm doing here. And those moments can be found anywhere. It doesn't need to be a passion project. It can just be sort of in creating or knowing what to do in a daydream. It doesn't matter. But the trick is to build these sort of micro passions into your everyday. So enjoy immersing yourself fully in an activity to nurture your vitality. And when we lack joy, it can be really like flat and like we lost our spark. And maybe you don't get excited about doing anything or even have the energy to start. And we can also have really like serious internal resistance with starting, even though we would actually really like to get on with creating and making. So how can you re-energize yourself? Here, I think the creation stage can really support that. So this is where your idea comes to fruition and you're just sort of making and doing. You're kind of like in that flow state, ideally. And if we can bring more of these moments of creating just for the fun of it back into our lives, it will really feed your creative spark. And again, I don't mean that you have to go and find that sort of passion project somewhere, but it's just activities that doesn't matter what the outcome is, just making and like enjoying the moment. And I really promise you that this sort of energy will feed back into your professional work and help you have that ongoing energy and sparks and all the nice things. So what happened in the video is I collected some blueberries from the forest that you can see behind there and dyed these fabrics to make the pattern of the fabric to match the landscapes. And I really had this is not a brief project, it was just me making things and enjoying my time. And I actually want to talk a little bit about being perfect and creating something to perfection. So in the study I did, I had people take part from 17 countries globally, people who are still studying, people who have recently graduated, to people who've been working in the industry for like over 3 decades. And 87% of them question if they are good enough. 87%! And that's such a high number, and it sort of could be quite depressing. But actually, I think there's a lot of consolation in this, because it's so clearly something that all of us go through. So don't beat yourself down if you're having doubts. It's just really, really normal. And I often stop myself even from starting, because I'm already so convinced, like, oh, somebody else has done it better, or maybe I can't imagine in my head already what it would look like when it's done and finished. And whereas in fact we should really just be focusing on getting started, just getting something out there to begin with. And in any case, I really don't think any of us or anything is actually perfect. Everyone and everything has the duality of negativity and positivity. And I want to tell you a quick side story. I've run out of my time now, but I'm going to hog a couple of minutes. Before coming here, I went to the North Queensland, and I was doing some snorkeling in the Great Barrier Reef. And I loved it there. It was so nice. And I found these pieces of coral on the beach, and I did this Instagram post, my A to Z of how to preserve the coral reefs, because we've lost half of our corals in the last 50 years. So it's just sort of A to Z of ideas. I think I posted this on Monday. It went a little bit viral on Twitter. So I think I can say it's got close to 1 million views, because it's 750. And the feedback has been interesting. So somebody said, oh, I think this is the coolest thing I've ever seen in my life. Well, thank you. Inefficient design because it's not readable. Fuck, mine. What do you mean? What do you mean? Oh, shit, I forgot W. I'm really sorry. Yeah, I don't know. I was out in the sun for a while. I don't know. Sorry. But you can't read. Yeah, that keeps repeating itself. It's not AI. It really is just me. Wow, this is illegible. You need to study. All right. And then it got a bit, look. Yeah, all right, undertail pug, okay. It doesn't matter, because it's not a perfect alphabet, but I love our underwater forests, and I loved my day in the sun on the beach collecting all these things. I had a great time. So ask yourself, what were you doing when you last lost track of time? So joy input actually brings us right back to the creation stage of the creative process. Creation stage is what will energize you. But joy will bring us right back to the beginning of the creative ecosystem wheel in finding your purpose in the connection inputs. Because if we find this little joys in our everyday, it will really help us to bring our life meaning. And this is how I now look at my creativity as an ecosystem where everything is connected. So make sure that you have time for nourishing inputs, so you have the energy to create outputs. So you can download my studies if you want to read it. There's some really wonderful feedback and inputs and ideas from people coming in. So it's on my website, on the Creative Ecosystem website, or there's a link on my Instagram, Studio Emmi. I have a workshop starting. I think it's due to start at 10:30. We'll probably start a couple of minutes late. There's a couple of places left if you want to join and explore all of this a bit more. We're not going to be putting any alphabets together, though. So thank you very much.